Hey, everybody, welcome back to Black Lotus Live, where we talk about all things strange and unusual. And tonight we have a great guest with us. Ralph and I had him on our podcast, the Paranormal News Network, I think back in March. And his name is Mark Fiorentino. And he's into uh, things like relativity and Einstein's unified theory, uh, field theory. And so it's going to be great having him on. He was a great guest on our podcast, so I thought we'd bring him on here for you guys. Um, the first thing I want to mention is that we are going dark next week, and the reason being it's Halloween, and Halloween at our house is craziness. I mean, we have a ton of kids coming here, so we wouldn't be able to do the show with the doorbell ringing every 2 minutes. I think the first year that Terry and I lived here, we had something over 300 kids come to the door. And, since then it's dwindled off a little bit, but not by that much. So yeah, we are going to go dark next Sunday, so we won't be around. But the second thing I want to mention here is we've got Off-World Adam in the house. And I wanted to say, Off-World Adam, I know you wanted to be a moderator here. And I tried to get you on as a moderator. And for some reason, I can't do it. Terry's a moderator. I was able to do that. But I don't know why YouTube is not allowing me to not do YouTube. And it's not just you. I tried to get Wild Trees as one of the moderators, and it won't allow that either. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong, because I was able to do it once before. But anyway, let me introduce our guest. Mark Fiorentino is an author, and he has been obsessed with Einstein's unified field theory ever since hearing about it when he was 10. He worked for many years in the high-tech industry, and including IBM. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. We're going to have a good discussion tonight. I'm looking forward to it.
So, tell us about your childhood interest in Albert Einstein.
Yeah, I got into it kind of in a strange way. I was going to church, catechism, getting ready to have confirmation and all that sort of thing. And I remember the nun asking us to go home and find a saint born on our birthday and, give a report on that. So I went home, and in 1965, no internet. So that's not such an easy thing to do a search for something like that. So,
No.
I did what we had available in that time. Ask your parents, and they didn't know anything. March 14th. So I went over to the calendar, and I saw that Albert Einstein was born on March 14th. So I looked him up, and that's how I got into it. It was fascinating reading about him and eventually I got into the unified field theory part. And I thought, wow, this is a really good idea. It just resonated with me. And that got me interested in science. From that day forward, I was interested in all things scientific. And I eventually got into UFOs because they seemed to be flying around without any normal propulsion system, that, no ion drives, nothing. They seemed to do it by biasing space somehow. And eventually reading more and more about that, I realized they use magnetic fields. So I figured they'd know about the unified field theory. And so everything I did from the early days on, every show I watch, every Star Trek, everything related to science, this is how does this relate to the unified field theory? Because always in the back of my mind, I was working on the solution. Just any clues that I could see, any patterns I could recognize. And so that's how I got into it. And it was just a kind of a passive hobby throughout the early years. And then as I got toward retirement, I got more and more ideas that were popping in my head. Some sort of infusion process of some sort seemed to be going on until I had enough notes and such. I said, I could actually write a book on this. And so when I retired, the first day of retirement, that's exactly what I did. And for the next 4 years, I wrote that book until it was complete with a lot of research on the internet. Internet is a powerful research tool.
Oh, right, right. I think it's
And
interesting that you were born on Einstein's birthday. So was I. So, great minds.
amazing.
Viewers, I dropped a link for Mark's book. It's called Master of Reality, Super Relativity, the Unified Field Theory. And so I dropped a link to his book on Amazon. So definitely check that out. He also has a website. It's www.super-relativity.com. So most definitely check that out too. So
Mark, would you want to do a favor for me and any of the guests that may not know much about the topic? Can you give a brief description of what it all means?
Oh, yeah. You're probably referring to the unified field theory itself,
Right.
or
Yeah. Yes.
That can be explained very basically and simply by it. Basically, Einstein had the idea that electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. So space was that single fundamental field, and in that time they called it the ether.
Okay.
And so he had the idea, as well as many other scientists from Newton's time forward, that the ether was either a gas, a liquid, or a solid, the space. And eventually, by his time, Lorentz and Einstein and a bunch of others were pretty darn sure it was a quasi-elastic solid. And from that continuous object, when I say solid, it just means something that is continuous. From that field, the other two emerge somehow, the electrostatic field and the magnetic field. Then the trick was to see how the motion of electromagnetic particles cause the gravitational field. And that is what I've done in my book. And now I put out a research paper on ResearchGate that explains it in high detail.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Yes, with the math. So I give the people a mathematical model that works and predicts the mass of a neutron. That's what you got to do in order to prove your theory works in this case. If you can use your math to accurately predict a particle like the neutron, it works for the neutron, proton, any particle really, which is what I did, and explained it in high detail so that you know what I'm talking about when I start to do the math at the end of the paper. Okay. So that really had to be done to back up the book, because I just very, gently touch on some mathematics in the book, realizing most people aren't going to be physicists that are reading that book. Right. And so I decided, hey, I worked it out in my head. It was in my head for years. I said, yeah, that'll work. Okay. But, I never really made sure. And so I finally wrote a computer program to verify it, and put the equations in there and worked all the way through the steps, which is a process, and it worked. It almost works too well. It works so well. And so it's done. That's out there. And so I'm saying to the world, I got the solution. It's done. We've made it. We've lived to the point in history where we got to see the solution for the unified field theory.
I personally think that anti-gravity is one of the most important things that scientists can be working on right now.
I agree.
But unfortunately, and I'm sure there are some, but I think people who do that are probably laughed at by other scientists.
Yeah,
especially physicists.
Yeah, physicists really are. They've lost their grip on reality. That's their problem. They've so entrenched in the idea of quantum mechanics, which, by the way, is the wrong model. That's why they were never able to solve the unified field. They were using the wrong model. In the unified field, in the quantum mechanics model, everything's about a particle-to-particle interaction. Well, gravity doesn't come about as a particle-to-particle interaction. It's a particle-to-space interaction. Somehow the particles are bending space, causing it to contract, and that's gravity, and that's what I've proven in the paper. But yeah, if it goes to, I studied gravity so that I could learn about anti-gravity. That was my deep dark secret plan. I says, if I want to know about anti-gravity, I first have to understand gravity. He who understands that will be the master of the universe. And so I worked on gravity. I wanted to know exactly what it was, to explain it fully. And then once you understand gravity, you know exactly what anti-gravity is. It pops right out and says, well, if gravity is a contraction of space, then anti-gravity is an expansion of space. And somehow I know how particles make gravity, and I found the particle that could be used to make anti-gravity, the electron, and flowing through wire that makes magnetic fields. The magnetic fields, in turn, as a byproduct, create an anti-gravity field. And so that's where we have to push our research in order to finally prove that magnetism, high magnetics, is the road to anti-gravity. And you're right. Yeah, the mainstream physicists, they don't want to hear about it. For various reasons. And of course, the government isn't going to help. There is no way that they're going to come out.
Well, and I think one of the reasons for that, well, probably the main reason, is because it would kind of screw up the economy as it sits now, and the elites won't be rich anymore because they won't be able to make money off of coal and whatever else, or gasoline,
Well, in order to use anti-gravity, you have to have a lot of power. So that means that the UFO people, the ETs and so forth, have solved the power problem, which means they have some sort of a power generation unit that's going to replace everything we have here. Like you say, the oil companies aren't going to like that. The gas companies, the power companies, they want a fuel to consume so they can charge rates and keep the ball going. And, a lot of people talked about this, Stephen Greer, others like that, who basically are in the right. And I know, because I personally, this had to be one of those weird synchronistic things that just happen in your life. I met a person who worked at a power company. I'm trying to keep this as generic as possible so they don't get in any trouble. This person said that they worked in a patent office and they saw patents that would change the world as we know it. There are people out there who have successfully found ways to generate power, free power, by various methods. I think there's like over 1,000 patents that have been concealed by the government.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm.
So, you need that to power. One of those is going to be really good. You need a small profile, large power generating device, maybe the size of a basketball, not much greater, that can be used to generate, hundreds of kilowatts, maybe even megawatts of electricity. And that same thing it could be used to power cities. And
so
they suppress
we're eventually moving that way anyway. I mean, I think I read that it's going to be by 2024 that all cars are going to be mandated to be electric. So I think we're moving toward that direction anyway. So if this kind of information could be released, we can always improve upon it.
Right. And one of the things that would be very helpful is room temperature superconducting wire, which I have a strong feeling has also been discovered and classified as top secret. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you put superconducting wire out and into the power grid, the cost for putting out the power drops dramatically because it's like zero resistance. You can send the power out for miles and miles and miles and miles without relay stations and such. It would be a major breakthrough. And of course, now that's going to be suppressed too for who knows how long now before until we get some sort of disclosure of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Wild, you're our scientist here. What are your thoughts on all of this?
All right. Let me say, thank you for being here, Mark. It's great having you. Great listening to you speak. You're a great speaker. Very knowledgeable. Okay, so I have a comment, a question, and a favor to ask you. Okay, I'll try to get through all of it. We got 45 minutes, so I'll probably get it all done. Okay. First, a comment is what we just talked about. The idea is very intriguing that you mentioned that there have been several patents filed for energy, for methods to produce large amounts of energy cheaply. That's really interesting. And that's crazy because I do think it's true. Now, I get to play devil's advocate, I guess, there are negative implications as well if these technologies become public, because generating a lot of energy easily or cheaply or quickly can have destructive power if used incorrectly. Is that your understanding? Do you agree with that as well, Mark?
Well, you could use it to make a rail gun or something of that nature.
Okay.
Which I'm sure the Navy is well on their way to already having. But energy, I don't look at electricity itself as something that, could, like a plasma gun or something like that. I don't think of weapons. That's a problem that humanity has continually made that mistake over and over and over again, and will continue to be wiped out until we get over this whole war idea. We gotta stop it. Stop being against each other and start working together. So when these guys like Searle and these other guys in the past who've tried to bring this free energy forward, they're good people trying to make the world a better place, and they've been shut down so far. And I don't think that there may be some people that'll. I don't know what you could do on a large scale. I have to sit and think about it for a while.
Well, I have ideas. But I don't want to put them into the world. I don't.
Don't. Yeah, I'm sure there's people out there who are always looking to make a better weapon, but I'm
weapons.
saying,
They also say destructive weapons.
If they do that, then we will get what we deserve, and then we'll have to start over again.
Yeah, and the thing is that any technology that has been released to the general public now, has first been tried to be weaponized by the government.
Right.
And once they figured out, we're not going to mess with that. Let's give it to the peons, And so, I think that that's true even with like smartphones. I think they've tried to figure out a way to weaponize it somehow. Well, they thought, it's a futile gesture. So,
yeah. They have abused the technology of computers and networks. Yeah. That's been brought out very, very clearly lately. And that's disturbing, but it doesn't bring about the end of the world yet, unless it's so abused that we become some sort of a fascist state. That could be a real problem. It could be used against the free thinkers. But I'm trying to focus mainly. I steer away from political stuff, and I'm staying on course to make this a utopian society. I'm fighting on the side of good, you might say.
Awesome.
Team God. And it's because my theory is an intelligent design theory, and I'm not going to apologize or anything about that.
Well,
truly the way I shouldn't. I truly know through many NDE experiencers, I've acquired a great deal of evidence proving beyond a shadow of a doubt this entire universe, not just the Earth, the entire universe was created by God, the creator, whatever name you want to give him. And there's lots of evidence for it. And using that concept helped me analyze and helped me bring forward my cosmology theory, because I realized certain things were done on purpose. They weren't random. And when you realize that and you find the reason, the purpose, then things start to click and make sense in the world of cosmology that really has mystified astrophysicists, like star formation. I know how that works now. I know how the Big Bang works. I'm making a model of a new standard particle model that explains the creation. I'm going to upload that, I guess, to ResearchGate as well. There's a lot of things that suddenly make sense. And the one I have in mind is the neutron decay. That has stymied people, physicists, they don't know why that happens. If you isolate a neutron in 15 minutes in outer space or away from everything else, it will decay into a proton and an electron. They don't know why that does that. But if you ask the question, why did the designer make it? That's not an accident. He needed to do that for a reason. And then I looked at, what did they decay into? A neutron decays into a proton and electron. What's that? Hydrogen. And what does the universe need? At the very beginning, at the Big Bang, lots of hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized the gigantic cosmic egg, the black hole, must be made of neutronium, solid neutronium material. And when that let loose and blew out all the neutron plasma, within 15 minutes, the universe starts building stars and galaxies, just what it needs. Now the neutron decay makes sense.
Cool.
That's fascinating.
Cool.
Wild, I'm sorry that I derailed you with that comment, but
No, no
you
problem.
said you had other questions.
Yep.
Yeah, go
Okay. So now the favor. I'm curious if we could engage a little bit back and forth with what you already described. So you already described the unified field theory, but I have to say it is a very complex physics idea. So I'm not an expert in it. So this is also for the viewers that are watching. I would love to explain it back to you, and let's go back and forth until I get it just right, because some of these terms may be a little bit uncommon to the viewers. Okay.
Right.
So from what I understand, what you said, okay, the unified field theory is a theory, an idea that describes the relationship between gravity, which is a force. We all understand gravity because if you throw an apple on this planet, it'll fall at a certain rate. And gravity is, this attraction between two objects. So unified field theory deals with gravity, which is a strong force, but it also deals with the static electric force. Is that correct? What is that?
Yeah.
The second one?
The electrostatic force is the Coulomb force. Yes.
Okay. So the electrostatic force, which, if I understand this correctly, the electrostatic force is it's basically electricity. What we understand is electricity. Is that correct?
Well, the electron is a carrier. All particles are partly electrostatic and partly magnetic. This is where we're going to get into the unified field theory, because that's why Einstein used the word electromagnetism. All particles are magnetic. What's important, if you want to really truly understand it, I deconstructed. That's why I say electrostatic and magnetic, because magnetism is actually a secondary force along with gravity. The primary force of our reality is electrostatic field, which is a vortex. The electron is a vortex mechanical object. It's like a
Uh-oh, Mark, you froze up.
Too many electrons.
tornado, a little point on one end, and then everything went black here for a second. Oh, there you guys are.
We're back.
That force, that structure, the electrostatic field, causes motion, and when the electrostatic field moves, it's moving like this, like a spinning motion as it goes forward. The magnetic field occurs as a rotational reaction to space as the charge is moving around, as it's moving forward. That's where the magnetic field only happens when an electrostatic charge moves. Okay. So that's 2/3 of the unified field theory.
And then there's gravity. Right?
The link between electromagnetism and gravity was always missing.
Okay.
That's what my paper on ResearchGate thoroughly describes, that final link. And I'm going to say it very plainly as I can, straightforward. Expect to hear thunderclaps when you hear this statement, but this is what super relativity says about gravity. Gravity is caused by the accelerated motion of fundamental unbalanced charges. When charges move in this way, they cause the space in and around the particle to contract. Gravity is a contraction of the spatial medium. So it's a special type of motion that causes the contraction of space, which Einstein's field theory describes, the metric changes. He just didn't know exactly how that happened, but he did describe the metric change and how his space is bent. And he never really, that I could see, use the word contracting, but I found it on the internet and in books that he had his happiest thought. And that's where I got the idea to make my formulation from Einstein's happiest thought, where he links, he sees it, but doesn't come right out and tell everybody. He writes like 5 papers on the Ehrenfest paradox, which describes what I just said. Gravity is caused by the accelerated motion of fundamental unbalanced charges. In his happiest thought, he describes it, and I recognize it. So that is the final link. That's what's needed to understand the unified field theory, how the motion of charges creates the gravitational field or mass.
And now the magnetism is the third component. So the magnetism is playing along with the electrostatic force.
It's riding right alongside of it. As the charge moves, the magnetic field, the space rotates in reaction to that spinning charge as it moves through space. So it's a secondary force. They're always together.
Got it. Now, leading up to this, another thing you said that I want to see if I understand correctly. You mentioned something about this phenomenon originally was thought to be in the ether, but then you said it's a semi-solid matter. Is that correct?
Quasi-elastic solid. Let me explain.
What's a quasi-elastic solid?
Yeah, I'll break that down into pieces for you.
Okay.
Quasi means that if you go out in outer space and there's no force field, there's no magnetic field, there's no gravitational field, you have like this Euclidean geometry, flat Euclidean, just grid works, right? Nice right angles, all flat. But when you apply a force to that space, like a magnetic field, there is a tension and stresses that occur. And that space bends. It's no longer flat.
Right.
And so quasi means if I remove that force, space snaps back into a flat Euclidean geometry.
Got it.
That's the quasi part. So it's elastic. So the next part, quasi-elastic, means that the space can be bent. It can be twisted and bent or stretched or contracted in little movements. The space itself is stationary, but when you apply a force to it, it can be bent, and certain little, stresses and strains can be applied. So that's quasi-elastic and then solid.
Great, thank you.
Solid.
You did a wonderful job.
Let me finish this.
Sure.
Solid just means continuous, not like wood or steel or metal that's impervious.
Okay, so you're saying solid does not mean matter in this case. You're not talking about
Matter is made from space. But it is not space. Matter is
continuous. Solid just means continuous.
Solid is just some material object that is continuous. It's everywhere. It has no parts. It is one continuous thing.
Got it.
Okay.
Cool. No, that was great.
Okay, good.
Let's go back to talking about Einstein. Do you think he was wrong when he said that we could never break the speed of light?
Yeah, and Lorentz had a problem with that. And Lorentz was Einstein's mentor, and he said, "Are you sure you want to put gravity as the speed of light as a maximum and a constant? Because odds are, in reality, I've went into this in my book quite a bit. The speed of light is not constant. and I can give you example after example where you can change the speed of light going through different mediums, air, water, glass. It slows down. The thicker, the denser the medium, the slower it goes. Gravity also goes, speed of light also slows down in a gravitational field. So there's loads of evidence that you could slow speed of light down. What I discovered when I discovered anti-gravity, there's a way to break the light speed barrier. And that's what our alien friends, our ETs, are doing at this point in time. They have realized that you can break the light speed barrier by any amount you want to. All the way up to and including infinitely fast, which is highly unsafe. And that's been achieved in laboratories here in the world.
Do you think these UFOs, I'm sorry to interrupt, do you think these UFOs experience time dilation when they're breaking?
Good question.
Yeah.
In my book, I describe something called the slip wave.
Okay.
This is a gradient magnetic field. So at one end, it's kind of strong, and at the reverse end, it's really strong. So you got a gradient magnetic field from the front of the ship to the back of the ship. That is required for not only anti-gravity, but for propulsion. Because now what you do is you buy a space and you create a pressure gradient in this field, this slip wave field.
Okay.
And because you do that, what magnetism does is a rotation of space. So let me describe what that means exactly. Mm-hmm. If space rotates, take a silly putty and smack it down on a comic book strip, and then lift it up and twist it. Watch what happens to the picture. It stretches.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, I looked at that. Even then, the things. This means something. I'm looking at it and I'm remember this. Why would I even think of that?
Right.
But it's important because now I have an understanding that's an elastic. It's stretching. Mm-hmm. If you stretch space, you change all of the Lorentz transformations. Mm-hmm. You're speaking of time dilation. That is one of the Lorentz transformation formulas. Mm-hmm. If you change space, if you make it thinner, if you stretch it, then it will, and you could still go very fast. You are allowed to go faster, but that time dilation where it slows down won't happen. And in fact, time goes a little bit faster inside of the slip wave. It's as if you're not moving at all inside of that bubble. And if you were to get to absolute zero motion relative to the ether, your clock would run a little bit faster than everybody else's clock.
Right.
So if you use special relativity and you just use rockets or something to push your ship forward, then it's going to happen just like Einstein predicted and Lorentz predicted. Your clock is going to slow down. What's important to not get confused about, we're going to get into time here, is that time is not slowing down.
Okay.
It's the device that's measuring time. It's the clock itself. All the molecules in there are slowing down because they're all being pushed forward and accelerating within the ether, and it causes their motion in that direction to go slower and slower because it can't go beyond the speed of light. And eventually all the particles in that clock lock up at the speed of light, and the clock can't function. Okay. And you'll be suffering from a massive amount of inertia. This is something that physicists will argue about, but Einstein did something that he did a little sleight of hand when he made special relativity. Okay. That I talk about in the book in detail. He knew about the Michelson-Morley experiment and that the ether was going to be disproved. Okay. Well, it looked like it was going to be disproved because they couldn't find the ether wind. Sure. And so everybody gave up on the ether at that point. So he kind of did some stuff and said, hey, motion relative to the ether doesn't matter. I don't need an ether. It's just motion from one thing to another. That's all we need to look at and think about. He said that because he did not want to get his theory rejected. And if he came out Everything that he did, everything that Lorentz did, all those formulas were based on an ether model.
Okay. Outdated model.
People don't want to admit that, but
Okay.
that's how those formulas came about. Poincaré, all these guys did based on an ether model. Fitzgerald, all of them were using a quasi-elastic solid ether model. And yet all of a sudden it doesn't exist. Yeah, that's not right. So there's a lot of problems that needed to be fixed. And Einstein kind of created a bit of a problem there. But in the end, he came back to the ether because with general relativity, he says here, I have it here. Very last, he made a speech in Leiden, Netherlands, I think it was. He made a speech in honor of Lorentz, and he said in the ether and relativity, and he says in the last paragraph, recapitulating, we may say that according to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical qualities. In this sense, therefore, there exists an ether. According to the general theory of relativity, space without ether is unthinkable. For in such space, there would not only would be no propagation of light, but also no possibility for the existence of standards of space and time, measuring rods and clocks, nor therefore any space-time intervals in a physical sense. What he's saying, if you don't have a real distance, it takes 0 time to traverse it, and we never see that happen. It takes 8 minutes for light to get to the sun, to the earth. That means there's something in between the sun and the earth that's really there. If space were nothing, like a lot of physicists, mathematicians say, oh, it's a void, it's empty, it's made of nothing.
Okay.
If that were true,
got it.
Light would travel like that here, and that's never what happens. It always takes time.
Cool.
Let's talk about time.
Wow.
Let's talk about time travel.
If I could ask one
Sure.
more question, it has to do with time travel, actually. This is my question. Okay.
Okay.
So time, this is not my question, but I just want to make a quick point. Time dilation is basically a form of forward time travel. I mean, it's a weird way of looking at it, but it is kind of like going into the future, time dilation.
Well, as you go faster and faster, you see space and time are related through motion relative to the ether. Whether scientists don't want to admit that, they'd all argue with me on that point. But it's if the faster you go, the closer you go to the speed of light, the clocks in your ship will slow down.
Okay. Here's what my question is. Okay. So what you described is basically like, let's say it's a time machine. So let's say you have a DeLorean, the DeLorean ship from Back to the Future. And what Mark is saying is that you're going so fast. You're in your little DeLorean. This is impossible, but let's say it is. You're going so fast. You're going the speed of light, which would take you about 8 minutes to get to the sun. That's how fast you're going. Now, when that happens, what Mark is saying, leading up to my question is that you in the DeLorean and the watch inside the DeLorean, you would slow down relative to everybody who's not in the DeLorean. So my question is, if you're traveling in the DeLorean and you're looking out at everybody who's not in the DeLorean, are they moving slowly? Are they moving quickly? Or are they moving still?
According to modern day interpretation, yes.
Which one is it?
I believe that interpretation is incorrect.
Okay. So how do you think they look? How do you think the people outside of you look? If you're experiencing time dilation in your machine, what do the people look like outside who are not going? Do they look slower?
This is what I think you would see inside of the ship. It would be very hard to look at the people outside of your ship.
Okay. Because
your brain would I'm talking about what's physically really going to be happening, which is, nobody will know until we get to a spaceship that's propelled by some ordinary, like rockets or something, which we're never going to be able to do. But
of course,
you're interacting with space as you're moving faster and faster within it, according to the theory of super relativity. So, and then photons that are behind you, they're trying to catch up, and they're going to be stretched out. Yep. So it's going to look like, if you could have a television link back to Earth, the twin paradox thing, if you could look back, might look like
Okay.
they're slowing down because the photons are being stretched out,
That's
but
what I
they're
was
not.
hoping. That's what I
They're
was hoping.
not.
Right,
They're
right.
not slowing down. And
But it
what's
looks like they are.
slowing down is your clock in your ship. It's the clocks that are slowing down, not time. Because if you take that big model that you're saying and put a third person in, so he's watching you, there's the guy on Earth and there's the guy in a rocket ship going out at the speed of light. And if he looked at all two of you and himself with his clock, the clock would be clicking. Everybody would be in the same time, no matter how fast their clocks are going. At no moment does anybody fall into the past or zip into the future. Everybody still remains in the same moment. So time really isn't being affected by all of this. Only the rate of which our clocks flow. So then when they get back and they say, hey, my clock is an hour late, behind. Oh, time, went backwards or froze. No, your clock just stopped moving because you were moving so rapidly.
I got you.
Within space.
Well, thank you for explaining that, because you did answer a lot. Those are some questions I've had for a long time. But so it sounds like, once again, to bring this back to time travel, it sounds like what you just got done talking about, you're basically saying that, like, if you go this fast, speed of light, like, you're not actually... It feels like you're going into the future, but you're not actually doing that. But in effect, it's kind of like for you, it would feel like it, because you would spend 1 week, let's say, but everybody else would spend like a month, right? I mean, so it's like you went into the future.
Well, going, without having a calculator here. And I did that as a kid, just curious.
Just estimating the times, yeah.
Yeah. It all work out mathematically where one clock will have not moved and the other clock will have moved forward normally. But the important thing is, if you did it for a year and you move at the speed of light, if you could survive that, which they would find you could not, your ship would be flattened to a pancake. Your mass would increase to near infinity. Believe me, you're not going to survive that.
It's a cycle.
To measure your clock.
You'll need more fuel, and then your fuel will have more mass, and you
would need way more. You would need all the energy of the universe to get your ship up to the speed of light using regular rockets.
Here's a follow-up question. So we're talking about this movement. We're saying if you go super fast, like in a DeLorean, basically it feels like you've gone to the future, but you technically haven't. But it feels like it. It's like kind of what happened in Back to the Future. Now, here's another question. We're also saying that doesn't seem to work at all, because nobody can go that fast because the physics wouldn't work. You would die. But correct me if I'm wrong. There's another way to get this time dilation effect that does not involve traveling at the speed of light. And I believe it is generating an extreme amount of energy. Like, if you have a lot of energy in one space, you could bend space and time. And you would have the same time dilation effect. Is that correct?
There is another way. Forget the time dilation. Throw it out.
Oops,
it's
I think you're muted.
Old school. Throw out the time dilation.
I lost you for a second.
Okay, am I back?
Yeah.
All right. Throw that out, and let's talk about what I discuss in my book for time travel. There's a much more efficient way than going faster or slow, faster than the speed of light. Even going 1,000 times faster inside of the slip wave will not move you into the future. You will be in present time.
So you don't think time travel at all is even possible?
No. I had hoped it wasn't possible. But let's just say I had some encounters and had some discussions, and I was convinced that it was possible. So I added a final chapter in my book right at the end of the book. And I said, if we're going to have time travel, we're getting to your ideas, Wild Trees.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
We're getting to this. We're going to get to. You're kind of close, so let's explore that.
Okay.
What you need to do, you have to realize, in order for time travel to be possible, this one thing must be true.
Okay.
All of time is happening at the same moment.
Okay.
There is nothing but an eternal now.
Okay.
And so you can access it
Yes.
by opening a portal into another time segment.
Okay.
We are born into this particular time segment.
Yes.
So we're bound to this, linear segment,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Well, if they're all happening at the same time and you figure out a way to modify space to open a portal, you could just step into another time, kind of like the Back to the Future that kind of zips through, but it's less dramatic than that.
Yeah.
It's like the Stargate. You've seen the Stargate show,
Stargate,
right?
yeah, Stargate.
Well, you can not only travel into other places or other dimensions, but other times. So you have to have the formulation, the formulas and such all worked out with this new theory, where basically what I say what happens with Stargates is right at the beginning of the chapter, I say, in order for this to work, this apparatus has to make something go faster than the speed of light.
Okay.
And I found that something, and it's a product that's available right now. It's a metamaterial called a
metamaterial. Nice.
Yeah, it's metamaterials reduce permittivity and permeability in the material. And why is that important? Well, there's an old equation written by James Clerk Maxwell that says the speed of light, c, is equal to 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. Those are properties of space. So we're back to space again. Space is the key to making all these things happen. You manipulate it, you bias it, and you can make these things happen.
You have to become the master. Become the master of space, basically.
If you master reality, this is how you do it. You manipulate space, and then you can jump through time. You can jump back and forward, which I don't recommend. I'm kind of opposed to the whole idea because it just doesn't feel morally right, especially going back in time. I'm not so much bothered forward time, but backward time, changing things that have happened, I don't think that's right. But it can be done, and I suspect it is being done. Yeah. I believe that we've already made Stargates because they have invented a device called a fractal lens. Look it up in ResearchGate. It reduces permittivity and permeability within the solid to zero, which they are claiming when they shine light through it, it goes infinitely fast. That's a claim. Verify it on ResearchGate.
Okay.
So that material, that's that thing that's needed to put in the frame around the Stargate.
Yeah.
You shoot the photons through this, they come out.
Yes.
They are hypercharged. So they're compressed to frequencies that are just enormously high.
Incredible.
And you make that, if you couple that with maybe some sort of vibrating the air at a harmonic with sound, along with that, they come out of there. The light particles come out of there like an electromagnetic shock wave, and they cause that space to tear open into another portal. And you could just step right through into a different time. And so you tune the speed of the light particles in the framework to get whatever dimension or time that you want to get.
Wow.
This is a doable technology that I believe has probably already been achieved, reverse engineered from ETs from who knows how many years ago.
Wow, bravo. That's brilliant.
That's how I think it's done. And we have everything here already. Of course, all this stuff is getting classified.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of uses for this material and antennas and making super telescopes, and there's all kinds of things going to be coming out with metamaterials. But you'll notice that there's a lot of talk in the UFO community with metamaterials, as the hull of the ship is made with it.
Yep.
Well, that makes sense because that material will glide through space with much less inertial resistance, because inside of it, it's got its permittivity and permeability dropped to zero.
Right.
The magnetic field that's surrounding the ship does the same thing.
Okay.
That's how you beat the light speed barrier. You have to drop permittivity and permeability to a lower number. If you do that in the equation, you'll see the speed of light jumps higher and higher and higher. And when you get to 0, it becomes infinitely fast. 1 divided by 0 is undefined. It's infinitely fast. The math has been already established for several hundred years. We're just now waking up to it.
That's
Mark, one of our viewers, Offworld Adam, asked, do objects moving in space at speed make a wake of unstable ether? And then he asks, if so, could the wake be easier to detect than the object itself?
good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. It's important to realize that when you make a starship that's going to break the or any UFO in the atmosphere or whatever here on Earth, when you make this strong magnetic field right immediately away from the hull of the ship, within the first few inches, the air becomes rarefied and the space becomes thinner and rarefied. So it's like a bubble, a very low density bubble that moves through the air. This is why you don't hear a shock wave and there's no sonic boom, because the air right and around the ship is so rarefied, it's almost like it's not there to the atmosphere. All it sees is this vacuum suddenly moving wickedly through space, and they can't disturb the air enough to create a shock wave. So that explains why we don't hear sonic booms when these things are going 10,000 miles an hour. And so in space, to answer your question, there's a ripple there, but it's an expansion of space ripple. It's the space around your ship is bulging out as if you were in a bubble. If you like to think of like a bubble at the bottom of the ocean, it rises to the surface because of a pressure difference. There's pressure at the bottom of the bubble. The strongest pressure is in the medium, pushes the bubble up from the bottom to the surface. In the starcraft or the interstellar spacecraft, the pressure gradient isn't in the medium outside; it's inside of the bubble. So that's what you need, is a pressure gradient in the thing that you're moving. That's how particles do it. Their pressure gradients are inside of the particles. This is the key. You'll find in nature, motion is caused by pressure differences. And I can give you example after example where pressure causes motion. Pressure causes the motion of the wind in the atmosphere. High and low pressure systems cause the winds. Pressure in the combustion engine causes the piston to move. Pressure in the rocket exhaust causes the rocket to move. Pressure on the wings of airplanes causes lift. Pressure is the answer, and it took me years to figure it out, but that's how I discovered this slip wave, by finding the pressure gradient that exists inside of particles. I've found the cause of particle motion, and that's what Einstein was working on, and very few people knew that. I'll prove it to you. In the Unified Field Theory paper of Gravitation and Electricity, July 25th, 1925, at the end of his paper, he's saying this: nevertheless, I'm still far away from claiming the physical validity of the equations I derived. The reason for that is I did not succeed in deriving equations of motion for particles yet. He knew it. That's the key to this whole system. That's what breathes life into the universe, the particles of motion. Knowing how they move, which I now have the model, which is in the book and in the presentation I give, I describe in high detail. With a little bit of physics work, we can come up with the formulas for that one too, and solve that problem once and for all. This is indeed the unified field theory. So to answer your question, space is modified in a kind of reverse direction. So there is, I don't know that it would echo out in some. You could tell by the magnetic fields there's something out there and it's moving and it exists, and you could detect the motion of a UFO. by looking for magnetic fields, because that's going to go way out into space and disturb space for a great distance.
Off-World Adam says that's awesome. Off-World, like I said in the top of the show, Mark has a book out, and it's called Master of Reality, Super Relativity, the United Field Theory. And it's available at Amazon. I dropped a link to that in the description. Definitely check that out. I think you would be, especially you, would be very interested in it. And he also has a website, www.super-relativity.com. So really check that out too. Ralph, you've been kind of quiet. Do you have any questions?
I've been just absorbing it all in.
Yeah, it's a lot to absorb. I admit that, but I try to explain it in layman's terms, because you can't explain it to your grandma. Like Einstein said, it isn't worth a damn, and everybody should be able to understand it. It's really a very simple mechanical process. It's just accepting that it is all it is required to understand the unified field theory is understand the simple Newtonian mechanics and how they work. And I tried to do the best I can to explain that, right, so that we can move forward to wake up scientists to the idea that, hey, we now understand gravity. We're going to work toward understanding anti-gravity. You were right at the beginning of the show. You said anti-gravity is the most important research going on today, and unfortunately it doesn't have a lot of mainstream scientists, but
it's just getting them to do it, and
yeah,
that seems to be an impossible task.
I want them to do this spinning magnet experiment, because if you put the magnetic field in motion, it enhances the anti-gravity effect. That's what we saw with Poklanov and Ling-Ni, or Ni-Ling. I never know which way to go with that name. I think it's Ling-Ni. They both did rotating magnetic fields in their experiments, and they say they saw a drop in the gravitational field above the rotating magnetic fields when they were doing rotating superconductors, which basically there's magnets underneath. So that's what's causing the effect, and the superconducting may also enhance that effect, anti-gravity effect. But we need to do more experiments like that in a serious environment. I would do it at the High Magnetics Lab at FSU, and where is that, Tallahassee? They got the really powerful magnets there, and but I just get a gut feeling, because the U.S. Air Force has been involved with all these high magnetic companies and research facilities for decades, that research may have already been done and classified as top secret.
Mm-hmm. I think
so. Maybe somebody in Europe will do it. I don't know.
Terry, do you have any comments or questions?
Well, I unfortunately had problems with my internet connection, so I lost you guys a couple of times. No, I don't have any questions. Like Ralph said, I'm just trying to grasp some of it. I noticed that Off-World Adam had made a comment. He says it doesn't seem so hard to grasp, and it doesn't, from what the bits and pieces I was able to. So I apologize because I missed some of it. I think.
Yeah,
I missed the opportunity to ask some questions.
Yeah, I saw you going in and out quite a few times, so that's hard to keep track of.
I think, honestly, this is a great episode to rewatch. I mean, I'm probably going to watch it 4 times, honestly.
Well, there's so much you need to absorb.
Get the full effect.
When you get the theory of super relativity, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. It makes more and more sense, to the point where you'll say to yourself, how did we not know this? The thing of it is, we did. There was pieces of it all over the internet, all over, since Newton's time. I just linked all the pieces together and did the little bit of final math work that just needed to be done. I used equations that are over 200 and something years old. I just modified them in a way to accommodate a much smaller scale.
Right.
I think it would be harder for me to understand this, because I don't get math. I just don't get math, and so I think it would be harder for me
Well,
to understand it.
Well,
But
let me address that.
It's a
Math
concept.
is nothing but a language to describe something in physical reality. So I think of it as a model. I keep using that word model. So it's modeling something. So that's what that's what anybody's math is really doing. It's saying, hey, I think physical reality works this way. Here are the equations that are describing it. Unfortunately, it can get pretty heady and complicated if you use quantum mechanics, and string theory is just only comprehensible by a very, very few people in this world.
I'd like to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm done.
I'd like to address this point because I want to make a point about this. Okay, I do think anybody watching this show can understand the ideas that Mark is saying, so I wouldn't get discouraged. The other thing I would say, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, once you understand these ideas, it's almost a religious experience because it'll change the way you see yourself and the world and the universe. Like, it's really mind expanding. You might even physically feel your brain changing. That's happened to me when I've learned concepts. So it's worth doing. It's fun.
well, that's what's happening with me, and that's why my brain hurts right now.
But that's what we're all looking for in these kind of shows. We're looking for the truth, for better understanding. What the hell is really going on here? Who's Bigfoot? Where's he coming from? These UFOs that everybody's seeing. Let's get to the bottom of this stuff. All I've done is got to the bottom of one thing, the unified field theory. I says, I'm going to solve that problem because you know what? In my prior life, I was a troubleshooter. I troubleshot the problem of the unified field theory. I asked questions like, why is nobody able to figure this out? Why are all these brilliant people not able to figure this out? And the answer was very simple. They were using the wrong model. And if you're using the wrong model and you don't know it, you keep trying over and over to make that model work, which is what quantum mechanics has done. They've had 26 tries at explaining gravity, and they've all failed, but they won't stop trying. They're wasting their time. Gravity is not that complicated. It never was. They just have the wrong model.
Man, I don't know how long we're going to go, but I do have a question. Maybe it won't be too long. But
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Let me phrase this question correctly. Okay. You've described how you think these UFOs move using metamaterials, and we've gotten into it, right? Here's my question. My question is this: okay? Before I ask you the question, let me back it up again. I'm a biologist. I love studying animals, all kinds of animals. Animals have amazing adaptations. Their body is a technology. As an example, like an electric eel can produce great amounts of electricity, right? So can we, but we need a machine or like a UFO. Okay, but the idea is that animals have adaptations that are like a technology. So my question is, do you think some animals, especially cryptids, have adaptations that let them do what UFOs do, but it's their body doing it?
Well, you have to realize that ET is not just a few hundred years ahead of us, not just a few thousand years ahead. There are millions. Can you imagine our psychic capabilities in 10,000 years from now? I mean, everybody will be walking around, be psychic mediums. They'll be doing telepathy. They'll be doing telekinesis.
Yeah.
It'll be like common, right? So when you get to be millions, you look at the size of their heads in some of these. When you get to be millions of years old, you're actually able to control the whole reality.
Wow.
Sort of like in the Matrix, how, when you realize what's going on, then you can control it and just with thought. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Thank you. It's funny. I got to bring up a point. You said you think that you said the ETs are probably millions of years. It's so funny because a few episodes on this show, or maybe it was another show, it was on Weekend Havoc show. It might have been this show too. I estimated. I was like, I think these ETs are at least 2,000 to 2 million years more advanced than us. But now you said 2 million, so I'm guessing I'm going to change my estimate to about 2 million years. more advanced stuff.
Yeah. I think they're all over. You might be able to get some clue as how advanced they are by looking at their spaceship.
Okay.
The more complex the design, the more far ahead they are.
Okay.
So the guys that are driving around in the ships, the interstellar ships that look like cigars,
Yes.
they're the most primitive. My
that's
guesstimate.
fascinating. That's a really great
Because
tidbit.
that's a very simple geometry, and that's the kind of geometry you need to go interstellar and create the right waveform and surround the whole ship. You need to surround the whole ship. Nothing can be sticking out. That would be very bad. So, yeah.
Wow.
So now the cigar shape makes sense, or the saucer shape. Now, the guys that do the triangular thing, a little bit more complex geometry, takes a little more thinking, not much. So the more complex the geometry, I would say that might give you some kind of hint that, well, these guys might be a little more advanced. But there's guys, there's ETs that are not, they're not just moving fast, they're using interdimensional. So they use the magnetic fields to create some magnetic resonant field, maybe with the fractal lens type technology, and they just jump right from one spot to another like that instantaneously. And all you're going to see maybe is like a green fog when they show up and they burst into this area. There seems to be a green mist or fog with people that use interdimensional travel.
Interesting. I have seen it in account. I have seen certain accounts, especially by Valet in California, of the mist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's like more than one way to send the interstellar cat. That's a highly advanced method. Hello. There I go. Yeah. That's a highly advanced method, which I would say would be several million years ahead of us. But these guys, I'm reading stuff now, they can do incredible things that, I didn't even imagine. Like, they can go right through solids with their spaceship.
I've heard that. If those reports are out there.
There's experiencers, people who've been abductees who are claiming, hey, they showed me how to drive the ship right through the planet and, take a shortcut.
Yeah.
Okay, that's like Buckaroo Banzai now. How do they do that?
Yeah.
You got to realize they're manipulating space in ways that might not just be using magnetic fields, but they may be using their brain power to do that somehow and create a vortex field or something. There's things that we haven't even imagined, or working on just now imagining that they're doing. And to us, just coming aboard their ship and looking at it, it looks like they're gods. They're doing things that, that are miraculous.
Yeah.
They're so advanced.
Yeah.
It's like, mind-numbing, the things they can do. Jumping from the one end of the galaxy into the other in a second, flying right through the Earth. Have you ever wondered? We know that they have underground bases, but nobody ever sees a door opening and letting them in. They're going right through the ground.
Yeah.
Cool.
They don't need a door.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've often wondered about that, actually. How are they getting underground? I mean, if there's
they go underwater, and then up from there, they go into the solid Earth. There's no door opening up.
Right.
Nobody ever sees the door, in a mountain or something. I flew right in. I saw the mountain open up, and then they went. No, they just go down, and if you're lucky, you'll see them just go disappear right into the ground. You're not even going to see anything. This is advanced stuff. This is like way beyond what, normal scientists, they won't even consider that. That breaks the laws of physics. You just can't just drive through something. Well, you know what? They're doing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Get your ostrich head out of the ground.
Yeah.
And let's get to work, because we got a lot of work to do to catch up here.
That's the problem with science today. I mean, I think, in my opinion, the whole point to science is to question everything, even your own theories. And that's something that I'm not seeing scientists do anymore. They're stuck in the past, and they won't open their minds to a possible future. And that's one of the things that just really drives me nuts about science today.
It's become a religion.
It has become a religion. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
No, I was
It's
going to
not
say that
question.
I was going to say, I think it has a lot to do with if they go against what they've already claimed, then they're looked upon as those who've claimed to be abducted. They're
Yeah,
gonna,
kooks. Right.
yeah, you're gonna say you're nuts, or they're gonna, be ostracized from, their scientific community, and I think they're afraid of that.
I mean,
Yeah.
Wild Trees can
Definitely.
testify to that, and that's why he goes by Wild Trees, is because he's written some very interesting papers, and he doesn't want to be discredited in his community. I mean, and so, yeah. But hey, Mark, I think we are going to get out of here for the night. Thanks so much for being here. It's
Yeah,
been
thank you.
very
You're
enlightening.
It was great.
Yes, thank
It was
you.
great.
Thank you.
Viewers, I hate doing this at this point in the show, but please like, subscribe, and hit the little bell, and then click all so you get notified every time there's a large problem in the paranormal community on YouTube right now with shadow banning, and a lot of people aren't getting notifications. So, but if you do hit the like and subscribe and hit all, then it's more likely that you're going to be notified when we are going to do another episode. But I hope, and really, we hope that you do like what we do here at Black Lotus. I mean, we try to bring you very interesting guests like Mark, very knowledgeable guests. And, I mean, so, this is actually a lot of work. So we really do hope that you like what we do. And if you do like what we do, we're not yet monetized on YouTube. And we're getting there, but it's going to be a while still. But if you want to support the show, there's a link in the description for buy me a coffee. And it's just a one-time donation. It's not like you have to be committed to anything. And then there is Patreon. And we got a Patreon page. We only have one tier there, and it's $5 a month. And for that, you get extra content. And, $5 a month, what is that? 16 cents a day. So please. And also, I want to mention another link that we have in the description, and that is our Facebook group. And it's called the Black Lotus Discussion Group. And it is a fantastic group there. A lot of these groups there on Facebook have a lot of trolls. We don't have that problem there. And Ralph and I are always on top of it. And so if we do have a problem, we take care of the problem immediately. We don't just let it go. So definitely go there and check it out and, sign up for it. But again, Mark, thank you very much for being here. It was great talking with you again. If you viewers, if you'd like to hear the podcast we did with him back in March, that's at our podcast page, the Paranormal News Network, and you can check it out there. But anyway, until next time, keep thinking and question everything.